Hello and welcome to Task to Process Mapping for the PMP exam. This is the third video in a set of 6, and it's meant to guide you on areas that you need to do well on for the PMP exam, taking a look at specific tasks and mapping those tasks to processes in the PMBOK guide. So let's jump into the executing process group. In order to ace executing on the PMP exam with an above target, you need to do really well in majority of these tasks. The first task reads acquire and manage project resources by following the human resource and procurement management plans in order to meet project requirements. Now we can replace that word human resource with the word resource if you're taking the 6th edition exam. But if you're taking the 5th edition exam, it's called the Human Resource Management Plan. But let's break it down again. It reads acquire and manage project resources. That is human, equipment, material, supplies, and facilities. Acquire them by following the resource management plan, whatever plan you're working with, and manage those resources, again, by following the resource plans for those specific resources. So acquire project team or acquire resources. You get the idea. It's really all about you, the project manager, getting these resources, be they internal or external, to work on a project. And then it's about managing those resources, be they human, equipment, or material. There still should be some measure of accountability. So if they're human resources, you want to manage. You want to make sure that they're doing what they should. You want to make sure you're giving them feedback. If they're not human resources, if they're just resources, then you would do more of controlling those resources. But managing the team is a different thing. That is specific to the humans. So managing the team, developing the team, acquiring the team, you note that the PMI uses the word team. But moving into the 6th edition, these resources are given the generic name resources. We don't specifically say human resources in chapter 9. We just refer to them as resources. So the key goal of task 1 is whatever the resources you have, be they human, equipment, or material, you must acquire them. And after you acquire them, bear in mind that in addition to managing the team, there should also be some accountability for how those resources, non-human resources, are being managed on the project. Now, to look specifically into those processes where this maps to, we have acquire team, we have develop team, we have manage team. And these are all interwoven. It's all about the people doing the work, the team members. Also here we have conduct procurements, because if you read towards the end, it says, by following the human resource and procurement management plans. So you are acquiring the team, but you do not acquire external team members without going through some form of procurement. You send out the description of what you're looking for, the bids come back in, and then you hire the contractor or the individual, whoever you are using as staff augmentation. And it says it is in order to meet project requirements. So there could be some associated processes such as plan procurement management and plan resource management, or plan human resource management, if you will. But the bottom line is this: PMI will test you on the acquisition of resources. Under what circumstance would you be looking for resources outside, and how do you go about it? What are the steps leading to the acquisition of internal or external resources? So for the acquisition of external resources, it pretty much maps back to procurements. That's why I said the plan procurement management process is relevant. So identify those inputs to plan procurement management that map back to this task. Identify those in plan human resource management that map back to this task. You cannot acquire team members that you have not identified as being needed. I need a coder, I need a tester. Where do you identify that? It is as you're doing your resource planning, you discover what you need. And for that reason, those studying for the 6th edition, the estimate activity resources process has been moved into the resource management knowledge area. So that's it for task 1. Let's move on to task 2. Task 2 reads, manage task execution based on the project management plan by leading and developing the project team in order to achieve project deliverables. So when you take a look at this, manage task execution, they're really alluding to the direct and manage project work process, because that's where you're managing the task execution, and it's based on the project management plan. It then reads, by leading and developing the project team. So leading the team, manage team, is that specific process where we give the team feedback, where there is a heightened sense of leadership, even though all throughout the project it is being done, but manage team is very important. And it also says developing the project team. That's the develop project team or develop team process, depending on the PMBOK guide you're studying. And the reason is, in order to achieve project deliverables, deliverables are an output of direct and managed project work. So this particular process has direct and managed project work written all over it. It also has the develop team and the manage team processes, and also quality assurance. As you're leading the team to achieve project deliverables, there is some element of quality assurance that should be happening. You could also look at this as the managed quality process in the 6th edition. So these are associated with everything else. Manage the task execution. Get it done, but get it done right. How do you get it done right? By making sure that the quality assurance process is being followed. Moving on to our next task, task 3, it reads, implement the quality management plan using the appropriate tools and techniques in order to ensure that work is performed in accordance with required quality standards. So this goes back to what I just mentioned about quality assurance, or the new process, if you will, manage quality. So in task 3, the goal is to implement the quality management plan using the appropriate tools and techniques of quality in order to ensure that work is performed in accordance with required quality standards. So what is quality assurance? It's providing confidence to customers that quality standards are being met. So task 3 is a direct map to the manage quality or perform quality assurance on the 5th edition. This process could contain some hidden tools and techniques and things that you should be aware of. Now, in the 5th edition, the process improvement plan was a strong feature, but not in the 6th. However, the additional tools and techniques that have been included or mentioned in the 6th edition under Managed Quality, you need to make sure that you know these real well. Task 4, implement approved changes and corrective actions by following the change management plan in order to meet project requirements. Task 4 is enormous. Task 4 is huge. Based on social media feedback concerning this exam, change requests could be the order of the day when it comes to this area. Change requests, what should you do if you get a change order? Should you approve or reject? It's going to affect several employees negatively, but it has to be done. What should you do? Stuff like that. So task 4 needs you to dive into the perform integrated change control process, understand that there is a feedback loop from there known as approved change requests. Now those approved change requests are going to be a feedback loop into direct and managed project work. Looking at the project as a whole, that feedback loop is going to allow for rework. So the implementation of changes happens under direct and managed project work. In direct and managed project work, we get approved change requests going in, and then we implement those approved changes and corrective actions by following the change management plan. Where does that reside? In the project management plan. So within the project management plan, you have a change management plan. You have a configuration management plan. But specifically, the change management plan gives you guidance about how change requests will be carried out. So if you have a change request, you should follow the change management plan. It should have gone through the CCB and all those other layers and come back again as a feedback loop. And that's why I have listed Perform Integrated Change Control as one of the associated processes. I have also listed Control Quality as one of the associated processes, even though they are outside of this area. But you could get questions that interweave Perform Integrated Change Control with direct and managed project work and also with Control Quality. Because as you carry out those approved change requests, you're going to get deliverable version 2 that goes to Control Quality. And that could get rejected. You get another change request going to Perform Integrated Change Control, and then it gets approved again, and there's a feedback loop into direct and managed project work. So it's very important to understand these feedback loops. I would advise type into the Google search box PMBOK mainline video. And if you type that in, it should come out with a video I have out there called the PMBOK mainline. That will sensitize you to feedback loops. I've heard from so many students that this video really helped them on the exam. So task 4 in executing, implement approved changes and corrective actions by following the change management plan in order to meet project requirements is huge. I would also suggest, if you're on the 6th edition, read the details of everything that is in the project management plan, and do not take your exam until you are clear on all of those subsidiary plans, including the change management plan and the configuration management plan. I have a video out there over 5 minutes long that goes into the differences between the change management plan and the configuration management plan. You might want to look out for that. The next task, task 5, implement approved actions by following the risk management plan in order to minimize the impact of the risks and take advantage of opportunities on the project. So let's read this a little bit deeper. Implement approved actions, that is direct and manage project work right off the bat. But it says by following the risk management plan. So this time, you need to account for the risk management plan as being part of your project management plan, which is an input to direct and manage project work. Direct and manage project work implicitly has the risk management plan as an input to it as relevant, because the risk management plan is part of the project management plan, but they're specifically calling out the risk management plan. So we may need to implement certain approved actions, corrective action, for example, by following the risk management plan. If there's a plan to manage risks in a certain way, we are going to use that when we are implementing approved actions for certain risks. And it says, in order to minimize the impact of the risks. So in my mind, when I see risk management plan being used here quite loosely, I also see the inclusion of other risk planning elements. So even though it says risk management plan, bear in mind there could be additional risk elements, such as your risk register. Now, your risk register is not part of your risk management plan, but I want you to think of the possibility of that risk register also being used, because the risk register also contains your plans for responding to risks. And that is pretty much what they're saying here. Implement approved actions by following the risk management plan and any other risk information in order to minimize the impact of the risks. You cannot know the risks by looking at the risk management plan. You must be looking at the risk register. which contains the analysis of those risks, the impact, the probability, the EMV, or what have you, the response to the risk, the escalation strategy, and so on. So you cannot look at this in isolation, just looking at the risk management plan. You have to look at all those other associated risk planning elements, such as the risk register. So implement approved actions by following the risk management plan to minimize the impact of risks that have been identified and take advantage of opportunities on the project. How do you take advantage of opportunities on the project? By following the risk response planning in your risk register. And that is done in a new process known as implement risk responses. So in the 5th edition, we do not have implement risk responses. We have control risks as being a catch-all for everything that happens after plan risk responses. But if you look at the 6th edition, they have included the new process, implement risk responses, to give you an idea that risks are not just documented and the strategy is not just documented, but we do need to take action on those risks by following the risk response plan in the implement risk responses process. So let that digest for a while. I know that was quite a lot, but the bottom line is the risk management plan, the risk register, those are going to be used in accordance with the implement risk responses process to take advantage of opportunities, which are positive risks, and also to minimize the impact of negative risks. Okay? So know the definition of positive risk, negative risk, threats, opportunities, and again, the process that we actually implement these approved actions in that impact the deliverable is direct and manage project work. So you implement certain responses in the implement risk responses process in conjunction with the overall directing and managing of the project work. Moving on to task 6. Manage the flow of information by following the communications plan in order to keep stakeholders engaged and informed. What do they mean by this? They're really talking about the communications management plan being followed in order to manage the flow of information. So they're talking about the managed communications process. I would like you to read up managed communications and try to get an understanding of how this communications is streamlined, how it is managed. How do you manage the flow of this communications? Read the process to understand the specific tools and techniques. Bear in mind here that some of the communications being spoken of will include the work performance reports, which are an input to managed communications. So the process, of course, is managed communications, but the reason why we manage communications is not just to pump out information. It is really to get our stakeholders engaged, and that is exemplified in the second part of this task. Manage the flow of information by following the communications plan in order to keep stakeholders engaged and informed. To keep them informed, manage communications. To keep them engaged, manage stakeholder engagement. So it's a twofold thing that happens in task 6. So to master this task, you should know manage communications and manage stakeholder engagement. So if you found gaps on your exam, maybe you've taken the exam before, this is your second go-around, as I'm speaking to all of these tasks, I expect you to be taking notes of places where you do not feel as strong or where you feel weak. Because even as I cover this information, I'm seeing gaps that I need to close. So I hope these are helping you to find those gaps. Let's move on to the final task in executing it, task 7. And it reads, maintain stakeholder relationships by following the stakeholder management plan in order to receive continued support and manage expectations. So I'm going to rephrase that as follows. Maintain the stakeholder relationships on the project by following the plan for stakeholder engagement in order to receive continued support and engagement while managing expectations on the project. So the big one here, of course, is managed stakeholder engagement. Managed stakeholder engagement is the process where you maintain stakeholder relationships. It is the process where you communicate to engage. It is the process where you communicate to receive support, where you communicate to receive any associated leadership influence that these stakeholders can use to get other people to do what you can't get them to do, to open doors that you cannot open. So stakeholder management is replaced in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition very strongly with the word stakeholder engagement in a lot of places. For example, we now have a stakeholder engagement plan. It is no longer a stakeholder management plan. So if you're taking the 5th edition and you're still seeing the stakeholder management plan, the language is likely to change in the 6th on the exams to the stakeholder engagement plan. So task 7 is all about that stakeholder engagement. And this last task concludes our review of the executing process group tasks in the PMP exam content outline. In our next episode, we will explore the monitoring and controlling process group. Thank you for your audience, and I really wish you all the best on the PMP exam. Remember, leave no stone unturned. All of these tasks are extremely important.